right, let's kick things off. So, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's AMA session. Is Web3 Decentralized? I'm Nick from VPS AI. You guys have heard me a couple times now. And at VPS AI, we leverage blockchain technology to provide decentralized, GPU-enabled virtual private servers, or VPSs. It's in our name, and containerized nodes. So our platform really caters to developers, businesses, and individuals, and we offer reliable and scalable cloud services without the high cost or complex setups. We have an exciting panel of speakers today, and these speakers are really at the forefront of blockchain technology and Web3 development. So let me dive into some introductions, and I'll turn the mic over so you can hear from some of our guests. So first, today we have our host, Thomas. He is the co-founder of Nadma. And Thomas, if you could introduce yourself, for those of you who don't already know you, you've joined us a couple times before, and tell us a little bit about Nadma and your ecosystem.
Hey everyone, a pleasure to be here as always. Hope you're all doing fantastic. Thank you, Nick, again for the amazing introduction as always. Again, I'm Thomas, the co-founder of Nadma. We're an incubator and consultancy firm based in Dubai. We focus on providing strategic value through network, strategic consultancy, advice, and also fundraising. We've been working with VPS for just under 2 months now, and have fell in love with their ecosystem, helping them to build partnerships and helping them to bring strategic people such as Ferrum and Taiko on board. So yeah, that's my short introduction, and looking forward to a really, really good space today with all of you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Thomas. So next up, we have Nathan, Ventures Advisors at Ferrum Networks and TDI Capital. So Nathan, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Ferrum and your ecosystem. Let's see, we might need to make sure we got him unmuted. Give us just a sec, guys. All right, we're going to skip Nathan for just a second and move to Piggy. So I'll come back and we'll circle back for Nathan. So Piggy, the head of gaming at Taiko Blockchain, can you tell us a little bit about your ecosystem at Taiko?
Sure thing, and thanks for having me, guys. It's a real pleasure being here. Yeah, Taiko is it's a Type 1 zkVM and the first based rollup. So what that means is that we're pretty much like Ethereum extended. It's within our ethos to be as decentralized as possible, and that's why I was also very much looking forward to this conversation. Very interesting topic, and I guess something that it's done the industry for quite some time. We recently launched mainnet. It's not even been a month. We're seeing a lot of traction, a lot of ecosystem partners that deployed on mainnet. We launched our token as well quite recently. It was like a week after mainnet launch, and yeah, our mission is to scale Ethereum without compromises. I'll leave it at that, and happy to expand later on the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. So next up, we have Nathan, Ventures Advisors at Ferrum Networks and TDI Capital. So Nathan, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Ferrum and your ecosystem. Let's see, we might need to make sure we got him unmuted. Give us just a sec, guys. All right, we're going to skip Nathan for just a second and move to Piggy. So I'll come back and we'll circle back for Nathan. So Piggy, the head of gaming at Taiko Blockchain, can you tell us a little bit about your ecosystem at Taiko?
Sure thing, and thanks for having me, guys. It's a real pleasure being here. Yeah, Taiko is it's a Type 1 zkVM and the first based rollup. So what that means is that we're pretty much like Ethereum extended. It's within our ethos to be as decentralized as possible, and that's why it's also very much looking forward to this conversation. Very interesting topic, and I guess something that has done the industry for quite some time. We recently launched mainnet. It's not even been a month. We're seeing a lot of traction, a lot of ecosystem partners that deployed on mainnet. We launched our token as well quite recently. It was like a week after mainnet launch. And yeah, our mission is to scale Ethereum without compromises. I'll leave it at that and happy to expand later on the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. And I have a question that I'm sure a lot of people might ask. How do you pronounce your name properly?
Oh, that's a great one. So my full name is Pier Giacomo, but I go by PG, just way easier, way shorter. I'm Italian originally, so that's I understand it's a quite challenging name.
Oh, thanks so much, PG. It's Pier Giacomo.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's two names in one.
Oh, thank you so much. Let me see if we got Nathan's audio fixed. I think he was trying to rejoin. Nathan, do we have you? I think it says connecting. Give us just a sec, guys. Technology, right?
Yeah, Twitter Spaces have decreased in quality over time.
It's been a journey. All right, I see him connecting. All right, I think we might still be having some technical issues with Nathan. So we will circle back to him as soon as he's able to get his technology ironed out. Thomas, I'll turn it over to you for a little bit, and we can jump into a couple of the questions. And once Nathan gets sorted, then we will we'll do a nice intro and bring him into the conversation. Does that sound good?
Yep, that sounds perfect to me. No worries. I'm just talking to Nathan in DMs, and he's just having some issues with hearing us. So I'll keep in contact with him, and hopefully we can get him back on. So yeah,
Yes.
Perfect. Let's just start with some pretty simple questions. Again, we're discussing basically the true nature of Web3 being decentralized, which I think is a very relevant topic to everyone in the space, whether they're into tech or not. It's something that affects everyone. So I think now that we've kind of got a taste of what our guests do, obviously apart from Nathan, hopefully he'll come on soon, is Web3 is often touted as the decentralized web, right? As Web3. Do you think that Web3 in its nature right now is truly decentralized? What do you guys think we need to push for in the future to change the current way that things operate?
I'm happy to take it and begin.
Please
That's
do.
okay. I think like first and foremost, like decentralization is a spectrum. It is something that a lot of people have debated on, and a lot of people got angry about and discussed and argue. I think it's the first step is to realize that again it's a spectrum. There is no absolute decentralization. Like in the mathematical term, like I would challenge anybody to like show me like a mathematical model that tells like what something is decentralized. We have achieved decentralization in many forms. throughout the industry, but nothing is like absolutely decentralized in every form. So, for example, even take Ethereum, which of course is arguably the most decentralized thing we have out there in the industry as a protocol. Arguably, probably more decentralized than Bitcoin at current stage. Even Ethereum itself has like several like choke points when it comes to like absolute decentralization. So you can be decentralized at the protocol level, but you can be very centralized at the infrastructure level or at the scaling level. So for example, like, what we do at Taiko is to solve the scalability issue on the Ethereum side of things without having any compromise on decentralization. And what that means is that pretty much like the majority, if not like all the rollups and L2 solutions out there today leverage a centralized sequencer, a single centralized sequencer to process and batch transactions and then submit them to Ethereum. What that means is that if that centralized sequencer, for whatever reason, goes down, has hiccups or whatever, the network halts. And of course, those sequencers are maintained by the company or the foundation behind those rollups. Of course, there's a lot of efforts in the industry, especially from these projects, to decentralize. It is a known issue, and people are actively working on it. So it's good we acknowledge these things. Of course, usability and scalability needs to be a priority for the industry. Otherwise, like, we can build like all the cool technology in the world, but like if nobody uses it, then what's the good of it? And that's why I guess like, certain compromises were taken in order to make, a beautiful thing like Ethereum more scalable and more usable. So if we acknowledge that and we're good with it, and we acknowledge that, the path to decentralization, quote unquote, is a long one, then I think, as long as, a particular network is secure, then it's good to, it's okay to take shortcuts. Not good, it's okay in the short term. That's my point. And then of course, like, I think in certain aspects, like, decentralization is not as important as it is, for example, security or liveness. So for example, the example I made with a centralized sequencer, like, yeah, you can argue it's highly centralized, but even more than that is like, it's a big risk, especially if you're like building businesses on top of these protocols. Like, what if the sequencer goes down for like 24 hours? So it means that like all the applications that are built on top of the protocol cannot operate for 24 hours. That, in my mind, is like way worse than like decentralization, right? Or say that something is centralized. That is a single point of failure, and that is more of a risk on the security side and, of course, on the liveness side. I'll stop there. Sorry, I've been ranting for a little bit. I would love to hear the other speakers' thoughts. But yeah, these are my thoughts.
Yeah, fantastic. Touched on a bunch of amazing points there. I think let's move on to Nathan. Nathan, if you can hear us now, would love to hear kind of an intro from you. And then if you'd like, I can repeat the question just to kind of go through that again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier. I was in the chat, but I couldn't hear any audio. But all good now. Got it sorted. Happy to be on here. I got a great panel. Love being a part of it and talking about a very, very important topic today.
So I know that over at Ferrum and at TDI Capital, you guys are focusing a lot on the DeFi side of this space. So I think we'll just roll back on our question there, which was, what do you think Web3 has in terms of being truly decentralized in its current state? And what do you think we need to change in the future in terms of operating in this space?
Yeah, I think PG started off mentioning, kind of the most important factor is that decentralization, there isn't, everybody kind of has their own definition or at least tolerance for what is acceptable when it comes to decentralization, because there's no one project or one point you can point at and say, okay, if you reach, X number of nodes, X number of validators, X number of whatever metric you're using to calculate the decentralization of the project or network or whatever that happens to be, that's decentralized, right? So we all have different tolerance levels or expectation levels of what we want to see. And, PG did a good job kind of mentioning, what are the different trade-offs of that? We're all familiar with the blockchain trilemma that hasn't been solved yet and potentially never will be. So yeah, different projects of different types are going to have different requirements, and each of us as individuals are going to have to choose what level of decentralization we're comfortable with or is required for the different products that we're using throughout the industry there. So I think that's probably the biggest point to start out with. But we've seen some amazing strides in this industry, and I'm a big fan of decentralization for everything, not just within our DeFi, but through all aspects of our life. And I think that's really the kind of ethos of why Bitcoin was created and why blockchain is around, is to decentralize all aspects of our governments, our technologies, and our lives. It brings a lot of benefits to it. Some of the amazing things we've done, I think, in this industry so far, obviously, Bitcoin kicked it all off. Ethereum brought in smart contracts. AMAs with DeFi, creating DEXs to revolutionize the way we trade is huge. DAOs are a great advancement. Obviously, none of these are perfect. There's a long ways to go with the different models that we've created, but we've set up some great stepping stones to really kind of freeing up the individual and giving power back to the individual, letting individuals take back control of their finances, and hopefully other aspects of their life here in the near future too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really interesting, like looking at decentralization from the perspective, which is comfort versus security, which is obviously something that a lot of people have tried to tackle over the past few years, just with, all of these emerging blockchains and all of the different decentralized protocols that have come out in the last, let's say, 18, 24 months. So yeah, Nick, would you like to touch on this question as well? Just kind of how VPS is planning to expand on decentralization?
Yeah, I mean, I liked what PG said, where it's kind of on a continuum. And I very much see that, right? Because a lot of projects, there are still challenges and hurdles to the decentralization aspects. And despite kind of advancements in a lot of the Web3 tech, a lot of projects still depend on centralized infrastructure, right? So like many blockchains have node hostings on centralized nodes to maintain their operations. You see a lot of centralized data storage, despite solutions like IPFS or Filecoin. A significant portion of projects still rely on centralized data storage for scalability and reliability. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, right? Because it is a continuum, and the answer is not to decentralize everything. But some projects have different needs, and again, decentralization is a solution to a problem, right? And addressing some of the issues with security, with scalability. Obviously, all your data in a single data center, and that data center goes down, as one of the guests mentioned earlier. That presents a significant challenge, and centralized file providers or service providers have worked to mitigate those issues with disaster recovery plans, having servers in different areas or data centers in different areas and things like that. And then Web3 has come and really built on some of those paradigms and continued kind of that push to decentralization. And then what we're looking to do with VPS is, continue with that layer of innovation on top of some of that technology. So working with partners like Pete at Kudos, where they're relying on a, DeFi DePIN kind of model to provide those services and provide that hardware. We can continue to layer innovation on top of that and really seek to advance that technology. And so, I do see it, continuing to develop. I think it's an important, technology that a lot of us, or space that a lot of us are working on. And it also helps, again, bring some of that technology to the masses. and allow people to participate and kind of create that marketplace that we've talked about in a couple of our AMAs, where you're able to, you have a lot of unused compute sitting around. And one of the biggest bottlenecks to the advancement in AI tech right now is just bare metal hardware and GPUs. And so if we are able to harness unused compute to do some of these LLM training and some of this modeling like that, right, then we can continue to see the technology or enjoy the technological advances that we've been accustomed to over the past couple of years. And I think that's just a really great spot to be in.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I think that's some perfect examples, and kind of getting more into some specific examples of, let's say, projects or even yourselves where Web3 decentralization is really demonstrated. I think it would be interesting for the audience as well to kind of hear how either you guys or how some of the projects or companies that you're working with are showing true decentralization and really pushing towards those kind of objectives that we all really want to happen in the long term. PJ, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So, for example, on our end, since we just literally just launched the network, we have a half step where we have to somehow maintain it in a semi-centralized way as for now, because the way Taiko is built and its design is that we have a network of proposers and provers. And of course, this is an open market, which is, of course, I think in my mind, even beyond blockchain, open markets are the most decentralized way to organize resources and times and efforts. But of course, to align incentives, you have to make incentives appealing to people. So that's what we're doing. And what that translates into in practical terms for Taiko is that, as the chain grows activity and as we build bigger blocks with more transactions, it becomes more profitable for proposers and provers to participate in. Of course, being less than a month old means that for now we have to kind of jump in and help steer the ship. But as the network grows and as usage grows, then we will be fully decentralized. And that what that means again is to align incentives with our with our larger community and the people that are running and supporting the network. So that's definitely a big component, and that's what this entire industry brought to light, because we see tokens every day and we see all the speculation and all the pumps and dumps and all of that stuff, but we should not forget that tokens are actually a great tool, and it's actually the tool that allowed us to build these decentralized systems, because it's the way that you reward people for participating in a decentralized environment. So this, tokens are a very, very, very powerful tool. Then, even on that side, if we look at beyond just technology and networks and, hardware and software, just from the economic standpoint, right? There's a spectrum of decentralization and centralization on that side as well, right? And that's why tokenomics are super important. Of course, both in the terms of how many tokens go to insiders versus the larger community, but also other aspects in terms of vesting and distribution and all of that stuff, right? And honestly, on that side, I think we haven't reached perfection either. But of course, there's a lot of great examples out there that are working today, and that's how we're building Taiko. To align the best incentives possible to make sure that from the protocol level, the people supporting the protocol, everybody's happy, but also on the DApp side and on the ecosystem side, people can thrive, they can build good businesses that can of course support the network, and the network can support these businesses as well. That's the sweet spot in my mind, building that virtuous cycle.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to creating an ecosystem as well. And I've been watching Taiko build just, over the last few months, and really with your guys' launch as well, it's been really fantastic to see how much you're growing, but also how much you're supporting the projects and how much the projects are supporting you. So I think in the true nature of a decentralized blockchain, that is what it should be. It should be people helping, each other for the value rather than like monetary incentives or, airdrop hunting, things like that. So, yeah, I think, Nathan just rejoined. Nick, can we just let Nathan become a speaker again? And in the meantime, Nick, if you want to give some words on that question as well, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nathan just needs to request speaker and we can get him situated. But yeah, I mean, so the question was, some specific examples from our project that really highlights or demonstrates Web3 decentralization. And I think that's really at the heart or kind of the core of what VPS is trying to do. So our technology seeks to leverage, or we work with infrastructure partners that are handling the logistics for essentially coordinating that unused compute and making that available to people who need to use it, right? So it's kind of that marketplace. So, theoretically, in a simple example, you have a desktop PC sitting in your basement. It's got a great graphics processing unit, and you're not typically using that for whatever reason. You could make that available through a network like Kudos, and then VPS can provide a layer of technology on top of that that essentially allows you to connect through our ecosystem, pay with something like a token, pay with Ethereum, pay with Bitcoin, pay with different, or a fiat on-ramp, and sort of these different methods, and gain access to that compute that you otherwise would not have access to. And that is very different than going to a sort of centralized model, the big three being Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud, and basically signing in through their website and provisioning and spinning up different types of compute resources. Obviously advantages and disadvantages of each. But I think that's a simple yet powerful example of kind of the trend in decentralization that we're looking to harness and that we've enabled with VPS.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Just checking with Nathan now what's happening. Okay, wait 1 second. Okay. Nick, did you receive a request from Nathan yet?
Yeah, I think the question was around what we're doing over at Ferrum in regards to decentralization, yeah?
Yeah, so pretty much like a combination, right? So I know you guys also work with a lot of really high quality projects as well as yourselves. So kind of like, some real world examples of how you at Ferrum and TDI and also your, portfolio companies are moving towards decentralization.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ferrum, we do a lot of different stuff. Ferrum is the parent company, and underneath the Ferrum, we've got a couple different other verticals. So the main net is focused on interoperability, and of course, one of the core priorities there with launching our main net, which is still in private test net at the moment. We got a few great projects building in stealth there. Will be, to have a decentralized network. We are currently working a lot in the BTC-Fi ecosystem, and I think there's some really amazing stuff going on with decentralization there. A great key example is around NFTs. A lot of the NFT projects that are, currently out there on ETH or the other networks aren't really that decentralized when you actually look at, where they're storing their data, where they're storing the, the JPEGs that make those NFTs. And one cool thing that's happened with ordinals is that the NFTs themselves, the data, the images are described directly on chain and decentralized that way. So kind of taking away those centralized points of failure. We're working hard in that ecosystem. I actually don't work on the mainnet team, so I can't dive too deep into what's going on there, but a great example of what we're doing around decentralization on our ventures team, which is TDI, which is the Ferrum's venture arm, is we have created a community fundraising platform, and one of the key aspects of that is letting the community, our governance committee, decide where we are making investments. So when we bring in projects, the team, myself, and our other venture advisors are doing the initial DD and screening, but at the end of the day, it's our governance council, our community, that is deciding where we are allocating funds, and they get to vote on all of that. And so, that's one great example of where DAOs are a really important way of adding decentralization to one of the many processes of the traditional, or one of the different aspects of the traditional financial market, not only giving power to decide where the funds are being spent, but decentralizing the fundraising model and giving opportunities to people that normally wouldn't have the ability to get in and join the market, where traditionally it's angel investors, very high net worth individuals, and venture capital firms that are getting access to these great opportunities to invest in early stage projects. So I think that things like launchpads that have decentralized fundraising and brought that to those opportunities to retail, as well as community raised platforms like we have over at TDI, are also doing the same. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to DAO models, and I think we'll probably talk about that in more detail a little bit later. But that's just one example over at TDI, what we're doing to help push decentralization.
Yeah, beautiful. Really well explained. I think all of you guys have explained some really unique value that you and your companies bring towards the space, as well as your ecosystems in that sense. So yeah, while we sort out this whole co-hosting thing, wanted to kind of ask you guys, so very recently, especially in Dubai, in the US, there's been a lot of problems and a lot of centralization when it comes to the legislations and regulations that are coming in place. A lot of that's happening again due to the huge boost of centralized exchanges in the spaces. Pretty much, as we know, they run the liquidity, they run the space and projects. So I think this is one obstacle that we see a lot when we look towards pushing decentralization. But it could also be seen as the opposite. It could be seen as an advantage that may help the space become more secure and more comfortable, as we mentioned in that first question, towards some true decentralization in that fashion. So aside from the legislation, regulations, etc., what do you guys think are the most significant obstacles that we have right now to achieving true decentralization in Web3? And how do you think that yourselves and the industry can address them?
Yeah, happy to start this one off. I think that the biggest hurdle for the decentralized platforms, I'll just use DEXs as an example, is the UX UI. I think we've all seen the struggles of the diversity of networks, all these different ecosystems, all the different wallets, all the different networks and chains, how difficult it is for someone who is not Web3 native, or even not very tech savvy, to come in and to access all these different tools and platforms that we have. It's extremely complicated, time consuming just to learn how to onboard yourself, let alone go in there and trade. And there's so many mistakes that you can make that can cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. Sending tokens to the wrong address, just to name a very, very simple one, can cost you your entire bag. So until we get better UX UI that's simpler to use, easier to use, more, I don't want to say necessarily Web 2 native or familiar, but better processes that have fail safes built in, that have the ability for reciprocity built in. That's one of the reasons that we use things like centralized exchanges, or platforms like Amazon, is if there's a mistake made, if there's a dispute, if there's a need to hold someone accountable, you have those built in through centralized institutions. If I order a shirt on Amazon that's supposed to be red and it comes in it's blue, Amazon's going to correct that. With decentralization, in a lot of cases, we don't have that. There's no MetaMask help desk that's going to come and undo a transaction that I've sent if I screwed something up. And so there's a lot more risk involved. There's a much harder learning curve. And so until we kind of get some of these systems of reciprocity and accountability built into DeFi, I think we're going to struggle with mainstream adoption. Obviously, there's a ton of benefits that we get with decentralization, but we've got a long ways to go to build in the tools and the platforms to account for giving the individual a little more security and safety in terms of whether that's from a customer service standpoint, a help standpoint, or just, again, simply better UX UI to make the industry more usable. As we start to solve those problems, I think the need for having these centralized exchanges and these centralized platforms will continue to diminish.
I thought that was extremely well said, Nathan. I was kind of nodding my head yes as you were speaking, and I too have spoken in the past kind of about I think one of the biggest barriers to entry in not only just decentralization but Web3 as a whole is the usability aspect, right? At the end of the day, people are becoming more and more comfortable with technology as a whole, but you see this, giant generational gaps as far as technology adoption. And so a lot of the companies that we now work in, senior leadership comes from a different generation. And if you've worked with those individuals, it's apparent kind of the different way in which they view the world and in which they are maybe more or less comfortable with technology. Day job, we see this right now where we've been asking for a comprehensive policy on how to use some of the LLMs and AI technology in our day-to-day work. And we still don't have that, right? And you see this in, American legislation where senators are talking about, they'll talk off camera and they're like, we have no idea what we're doing when it comes to regulating this technology. And so I think the point I'm trying to make, right, is that the biggest barrier to adoption, and then also having more people come into sort of the space, which kind of continues and fuels growth, especially with respect to decentralization, is just how to use the technology. That I need to go into or worry about accidentally sending my token or my digital asset to the wrong address and it's lost forever is just really an unacceptable risk for most people. And that I need to even do a test transaction, right? That's like, you go onto Reddit and people are like, hey, I accidentally did this thing. Can I get my money back? And then you get, just dragged because you didn't do a test transaction, right? We can't have that type of risk in the space. I thought the Amazon example was brilliant, right? If I screw up an order, I go on and in 2 or 3 minutes chatting with a virtual agent, they've not only overnighted me the next thing, but I have a return label in my inbox, right? And so some of the advantages you get, right, where you have that decentralized trust network, they're great for many use cases, but not having that centralized arbiter can present challenges, I think, which the industry is still looking to or trying to figure out how to solve. And so I very much agree with you. I thought that was very well said.
I couldn't agree more, guys. And just to add a little bit, I would say, like, again, going back to like what I said at the beginning, like decentralization is a spectrum. It's also the case in the sense of like what different groups of people actually care about. And the majority of the people out there actually care about like an Amazon-like experience, right? And we should all aim to like deliver that. I think it's honestly up to us, like the people actually building this, the people like involved in the industry, that actually understand and believe into like the core principles to build those foundations in the best way possible. So that the end user doesn't need to like actually have to care about the like, oh, that particular protocol that I'm using to like, swap this token on my phone. The majority of the liquidity is actually secured by like five signers multi-sig, right? That type of stuff, the majority of people will never care. They won't even know about it, right? So it's up to us to actually, build the systems in the best way possible. And as like we grow the amount of users, the ripple effect, it becomes even more critical to have built this system in the proper ways, right? Because like we have good adoption, like there's money there in the industry, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of users, but like the end game here is to like run financial systems on top of blockchains, and that's that means like it's not about like fucking around, pardon my French, with like some meme tokens. It's literally like securing people's like saving accounts, right? And like make sure that they have the money there. And that their money is actually on top of something that is solid. So all these things are hard problems, and historically in the history of humanity, like hard problems are usually solved by like very dedicated small groups of people rather than like 7 billion people. So I would say it's on us. And the last thing I want to say, which I think is very, very important, a little bit, no, not super related to decentralization, but related to like what was said before about governments and stuff. I think like another very important feature that we need to like work on is privacy. And of course, that's also why technologies like zero knowledge are very important. And as a space, we are the ones that actually have pushed this into like practical use cases. So that's something we should all be proud of, in my opinion. But that's what like governments are really scared about, right? Because that's how they lose control. And of course, there's a lot of like bad use cases around like, secrecy and privacy, bad actors and whatnot. So even on that side, it's up to us to like actually make things right. Of course, to our best, potential. Of course, there's always gonna things that fall through the cracks, but we should not take shortcuts at all. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, some really, really interesting points there. Again, I think, looking at the way that the space is moving, we have to kind of understand from, the traditional perspective as well, right? That we, as Web3, might be seen as a threat to traditional finance, which makes sense. And therefore, they don't understand us, right? But I think it's more of a case that as we move more towards, these blockchains becoming centralized entities, banks adopting crypto, governments adopting crypto, ETFs, all of this is moving towards big financial institutions coming and adopting blockchain, which I think will be a really big turning point, not only for DeFi, but also for the centralized world, right? It's going to change banks. It's going to change institutions. It's going to change everything that we know about finance. And I think that will truly be a point where we can, really dig in and kind of see what blockchain was originally meant to be used for, which I think, again, as you guys mentioned, has been lost behind everything that we see now, like meme coins, a bit of GameFi. It's just all covering the true technology as well. So yeah, moving on to our next question. Very simply, this is kind of based off our last question as well, right? And is kind of looking at how do centralization and decentralization coexist in the current Web3 ecosystem? For example, looking at decentralized and centralized exchanges. And aside from centralized exchanges, which areas do you guys think that centralization will still be necessary in the future or even now?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I think there's absolutely a place for both. I think you see a lot of projects adopt kind of a hybrid model, right? And at the end of the day, like technology just helps us make advancements and solve people's problems. And, again, I don't think a decentralized approach is necessarily like the end goal, right? It is a way to do things better. Is it always the right technology or the right way to do things? Certainly not, right? When you're looking at, efficiency and speed, a lot of times centralized components can still provide faster processing times, more efficient data management. And even circling back to one of the biggest obstacles we just discussed, which, those are really critical for ensuring a strong user experience and, practical application design, right? So kind of enabling that Amazon-like experience. While you can do that on decentralized components, also the technology is newer, right? And so, just from a very practical standpoint, finding devs that are fluent in the new technology, finding quality software engineers is hard enough. Finding quality software engineers who are fluent in Web3 tech and, able to spin up decentralized apps, harder still, right? And so, sometimes it makes sense to build with the technology you're most familiar with, kind of nail that customer problem. And then as, a business or an enterprise, you can look to scale as part of kind of your ethos or, the area in which you want to contribute towards decentralization. You can look at how you can leverage that technology or to decentralize your app or your service in the future. And so I think, the hybrid model absolutely makes sense. You get advantages from, security and trust standpoint and decentralization. So that's a way in which they can kind of coexist. I think you look at things like resource usage, and that's something that we've spoken about in terms of the compute usage. And so decentralized networks tend to be a little bit more resource intensive and require a lot more computational power and bandwidth to maintain, which can limit the ability of smaller participants to kind of engage in that network. And then also ensuring interoperability, right? That is a, kind of orchestrating a technology like IPFS where you're attempting to shard and, move data across a distributed network can be a lot more complex, right? And so, something like an Amazon, again, back to the user experience, one-click deployment to get an AWS node up and running, and then have Amazon abstract away all the complexity of ensuring that your data has a very high reliability is enticing, right? And it can be more costly or more costly for you to do that, but you're paying for that convenience, right? And you're paying for that technology and the innovation that they've done on their side. So I think it very much depends on the use case, right? And selecting and being thoughtful about the technology that you're selecting and looking to leverage for whatever it is you're trying to do.
Beautifully said. Nathan, do you want to take this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a ton of great examples of where we cooperate between centralized and decentralized platforms or technologies in the space. The most obvious and easiest to kind of touch on is centralized versus decentralized exchanges. A lot of us here probably use some sort of centralized tool, whether that's an exchange or otherwise, to on and off ramp fiat into the crypto ecosystem, but then probably trade using an AMM or a DEX of sorts, so we can maintain custody of our own funds. So I think that's really a poignant example of where the two technologies can benefit each other and combined. Now, in terms of another great example is like gaming. What's going on in gaming right now? There's so many benefits for gamers and games themselves, decentralizing and using the Web3 technologies. But the gameplay itself, a lot of the front ends for the games are still on Web2 platforms, and then they're taking the data on chain. Another great example of where those two technologies are combining. Now, how do we get to the point where we don't need centralization or centralized platforms, or don't need them as much? I think if we go back to the centralized exchange versus decentralized exchange example, when we're talking about finance, there is all sorts of regulatory hurdles to overcome, obviously, and on-ramping, off-ramping fiat is continuing to develop, and there's some interesting platforms out there building some cool tools to decentralize that portion of it. I think we'll see the really big shift into not needing as much of the centralized exchanges or the centralized on and off ramps when we see two things, one of which we already talked about, being the better UX UI and tools for accountability, reciprocity, things of that nature. But the other side of it is when we really start to see adoption of cryptocurrencies in economies around the world, when we're able to go to coffee shops, grocery stores, pay our rent, etc., with crypto, where we don't need to off ramp back into fiat, where we're natively staying in blockchain and using blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies to deal with the aspects of our everyday life where we would normally use fiat. Obviously, that's a long ways out. There's some great strides being made there, but I think when we see that point, or we get to that point, that's where the focus can really shift towards these decentralized platforms and away from needing to use the on and off ramps and the centralized exchanges that we have in place now.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think a lot of those problems also visualize themselves. For example, in Dubai, like there is a lot of centralized exchanges that operate out of the MENA region, but a lot of them struggle to handle something even as simple as on and off ramping, right? Like myself, our business is based in Dubai, and we use like Binance P2P as literally our only method of actually on and off ramping crypto to our bank accounts directly, because all of the exchanges either have extremely high fees, or they take, 2 days to 5 days to actually process a transaction like that. So kind of Binance has been saving our lives on that front. But apart from them, there's really been no good solutions apart from OTCs and P2P that have provided us that, right? And you even see it in places like Turkey, which Turkey has like the biggest volume in the entire crypto space geographically. They have in-person exchanges where you can go in there, transfer some USDT to them, and you get cash. You get Lira, you get USD, whatever you want, and they take, like a 2-3% commission. So even when those in-person places become more, utilizable, easier accessible than centralized exchanges, then you've kind of got to start to worry and question how good and how effective these centralized exchanges really are. So that's some very, very interesting points on that front as well. PJ, did you answer the question yet? I don't believe you did.
No, I did not actually, but it's a lot of good stuff there. I liked a couple of like points that were touched. First one was around DAOs, in the sense of like that's yet another component of decentralization when it comes to like blockchains, which is like how to organize resources in the best way to actually like properly fund an ecosystem. And oftentimes a lot of like, especially early, there's some decisions need to be made in a semi-centralized way. On our end, for example, like Taiko runs a grant program, and we do have a grant committee. It's multiple people, and we evaluate proposals and we make decisions. And at this stage, it's arguably the best way to do it. So sometimes you don't need like a lot of people. When it comes to decision making, right? You don't need to be like super decentralized, right? Of course, like DAOs have evolved, and like some of them now govern like some of the largest protocols. So we actually like experienced like the Uniswap DAO mechanism ourselves, because we put up a proposal to get integrated, and it passed. But it was a lot of political game we had to play. You have to reach out to people, kind of pitch it, like why it's meaningful and all of that. So it's kind of like somehow like kind of like in the real world, but still it's way more transparent. So I applaud this, how we evolved the space in this type of like decision making. But again, like there's a spectrum. So like on our side, it makes sense that we're still like making decision internally in a small group of people, but we are actively working on a DAO. Our CEO as well, like is heavily involved now that mainnet is launched. That's like one of his like next big focuses, and I think rightfully so. So we can have the community come on board and govern the protocol and help out in decision making. So that's one thing. And on the other side, like on the gaming side that was touched upon. I think gaming is a great example where like, a hybrid solution is still like very well accepted and probably the right thing to do. Because at the end of the day, the majority of like, gamers, they actually want to have a fun experience. So having like some components off chain, right? There is a trend with like fully on chain games and whatnot, but they're still like very expensive, probably quite slow depending on like what network you build them on. But still like very, very interesting technology that I think it's going to have like a great momentum, but probably a little bit too early at this moment. But it's definitely great to experiment. But yeah, that's an example where like having something that is hybrid makes a lot of sense. And yeah, let's see how it goes. I think the gaming niche within crypto is definitely a lot of fun, and it's where a lot of innovation can happen and meaningful one. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun like talking to founders, see how they approach these problems and how they're building their games.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah, I think that also touches on the point, which I find very interesting myself, which is when Web3 was originally invented, when blockchain technology was created, it was created not to be a replacement for centralized finance, but to be another layer on top. It was meant to be an improvement. So, you go back to like the Bitcoin white paper, you look at any white papers of the first chains that came out, and that was essentially their core values, was to improve something, not to replace it. So if you look at Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, they never internally replaced the entire technology. They just built upon it. So I think the notion of Web3 building as an entirely separate ecosystem is very, how do you say, arrogant in the eyes of a lot of people in this industry. And I think it's in our best interest to work with these people and really move towards an industry that's going to benefit from both ends, right? And I think that's also interesting. Also, PJ, you mentioned in your talk about DAOs. So I think our next question actually touches a little bit on that. But from a governance perspective, how decentralized are most Web3 projects? And in your eyes, what governance models do you think work the best to achieve what we can quote as true decentralization?
Oh wow, that's a tough one. I think there's no perfect example, to be fair. I think actually, there was a little bit of like a DAO hype, a couple of years back. I think a lot of DAOs proved to be like pretty much useless, in the sense that like if there's not a lot of like incentives out there and stake, then people naturally just don't grab. Like governance is hard. Like governance is like it's a lot of work. You need to like coordinate humans. That's literally like one of the like hardest jobs that our kind has ever faced. So even if you have technology to help you, there's there's still like a lot of like human work, quote unquote, that needs to be done. Again, like the Uniswap example that I made is one, right? Because you can have a bunch of tokens to vote on proposals, but like maybe you don't even know that a proposal is out because, hey, guess what? The free signers of the wallet are out on vacation, for example, right? So there's the human component to it. But definitely DAOs are a great way to manage treasuries, in my mind, and do it in a transparent way. That's already a huge improvement to the legacy system. Like there's a lot of like big like pieces of infrastructure in our society that manage a lot of money, and we have no idea how that money moves and where it stays and who decides on what. And these things like they affect our lives. So I think that's like one of the great use cases that DAOs can showcase. Again, it's a matter of like, it's also at the end of the day, like we're humans. It's also a matter of like having the right people like to lead, right? So, the ones that actually manage this needs to be like trusted people, and it's okay to have like a level of trust, right? We shouldn't be like fully trustless, and that's yet another like part of decentralization, right? This concept of trust. But if we have like good actors, and there's many in this industry, despite all the bad ones that we've seen, then we can trust that these systems can be pushed in the right way, and that the right people can get involved, and that they can work. But again, like we are building like foundational infrastructure, at least in my mind, and that's like a long-term journey. So like we have to be patient and do it properly. But I think it's already paying off to a certain extent, and it will definitely pay off overall for society in the long term.
Fantastic. Nathan, you want to touch on this?
Yeah, I think you guys made some great points around DAOs, and DAOs are one of those love them or hate them kind of things. There's a lot to be done yet in that space. It has given us some great opportunities to let our voices be heard, but there's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding of even the term democracy, which is kind of at the heart of DAOs. Pure democracy in its purest form is simply mob rule, and mob rule doesn't work when you're trying to run a business. So we've seen lots of issues with DAOs where, whether votes happen and people aren't informed, or votes happen and then the team still does something different, or lots of different scenarios that have popped up. And DAOs certainly have a place. There's a lot that can be done to improve them, make them better, more efficient, more impactful. But I think as projects, we need to find ways to utilize DAOs that benefit our communities, but at the same time limit the power of the DAO. And again, every project is different, and there's certain aspects that can 100% be run by a DAO. But running a blockchain company, we're at the bleeding edge of technology here. Thinking that our audience is going to be able to necessarily make the best decisions or understand the inner workings of what's going on behind the projects. Simple token holder doesn't have access to that information, or in many cases, the ability to make decisions that are going to be best for the project. So there are aspects of most projects that probably shouldn't be left up to DAOs. We can't have a company that's completely run by the whims of audiences. We know how fickle the retail market is. Anytime there's watch crypto Twitter, this week is a great example. Bitcoin was down, and within a 24-hour cycle, we had people calling for a recession, saying the market's over, we've topped, doom and gloom. And then we got a pump the next day, and the same people that were fudding the day before now, max longing. So that's not something that, as running a business, you can have that kind of instability. But there are great things that you can incorporate with the DAO. As I mentioned before, at TDI, we have a voting mechanism for what project's going to invest in. So when it comes to community investment platforms, DAOs 100% can be effective and really give power to the individuals that are a part of that DAO to move to have their voices be heard and to make the decisions for how their money is going to be spent, or the opportunities that are going to be brought to them. So powerful tools when used in the right context and in the right place, I think. I actually got to hop here. I got to get on another call. Just wanted to say a huge shout out to everybody on the call, and thank you for tuning in and listening. Thank you to Nadma and VPS and Taiko for putting this together and having me on here today. And just kind of one final point I'll leave you guys with, that you guys can discuss, or at least maybe the audience can think about, is how interoperability is going to play a role in decentralization. We have so many great tools being built within the Web3 space, so many great networks being built, all that have different unique propositions, value propositions. We've talked a lot about how different networks approach the blockchain trilemma, and how decentralization fits into that, what compromises are made for security, for speed, for other things of that nature. And we at Ferrum definitely believe in a multi-chain future. We don't think there's going to be one chain to rule them all. There's different chains that have, again, different unique value propositions, and I think that's always going to be the case. And so that's where we think interoperability plays such an important role in pushing decentralization and pushing the blockchain industry forward in the future. The original concept of decentralization was all around the composability of assets, being able to move funds, being able to move tokens between the different networks, and that led to all sorts of great opportunities and tools being built in the DeFi ecosystem. It obviously led to a lot of hacks and exploits as well, but we're quickly moving past the days of bridges into much more secure and efficient methods of composability of assets. But that's not where interoperability stops. And I think that the real opportunities for interoperability to push for decentralization is when we can unsilo this fragmented system of networks and ecosystems that we have within crypto, all the different chains and liquidity that's all fragmented, separated all across Web3. Interoperability of data, composability of data, of not just assets, but data, information flow, our dApps, our smart contract functionality, being able to operate across different ecosystems and different networks, that is going to open up a ton of different possibilities, and touches on that point we made earlier of the UX, UI, the usability of Web3, when we don't have to flip between wallets and understand all the different gas fees and fee tokens and all the mess that is DeFi at the moment. When we can have dApps and smart contracts that function across different networks seamlessly, that's going to be a huge step towards making this industry more usable and pushing decentralization forward. And that's what we're working on over at Ferrum with our mainnet. So again, guys, huge shout out to everybody listening. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys learned something. Make sure to go give these guys a follow at VPS. They're building some awesome stuff. Same thing at Taiko, doing some great stuff over there. Shout out to my boy Ken over at Taiko as well. I don't know if he's listening today. Ken's a good buddy. Know the Taiko guy as well. I got to hang out with them in Hong Kong a bit. So it was a great team. Some really great people over there. And Nadma as well. I've known those guys for a long time. Really appreciate you guys inviting me on today, and look forward to continuing to working with all you guys in the future. Have a great rest of the day, guys.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Been an absolute pleasure to have you, and looking forward to having you on in some future spaces as well. All right, guys. Nathan seems like he's going to stay now. He's been wooed by the community. But yeah, so I think that's all the questions that we have. We do have some questions from the community, which is fantastic. So we can just start with a few of them. The first one we have is from Techcrypto Snuggler, which is, would love to hear a layperson's definition of decentralization, and what are some real-world applications for and why decentralization is important?
Yeah, happy to jump in on that one. So I think a very simple definition, right, is decentralization really means distributing control and decision-making away from a centralized authority to multiple independent entities. And why it's important is it really enhances security, improves transparency and fairness, and that's done through preventing like a single entity from having too much power, right? And so, some examples, right? You take a traditional bank versus something like Bitcoin. So in a traditional bank, a single bank account controls your account and transactions. And so if the bank has an issue, your access to that money can be affected. And whereas Bitcoin, we've got a ledger, so there's no centralized authority. Instead, transactions are validated by a network of independent computers, or the nodes. And so no single entity can control or manipulate the system. And, again, why is that important, right? It improves security. So there's not a single point of failure, promotes transparency. You have open public records, right? The ledger is public. You can go see all the transactions. And it really empowers individuals, right? So it reduces our reliance on centralized authority, giving more control to individuals.
Fantastic. Let's move on to our next question. So this is directed at Nick. So Humaira asked, I wanted to ask, what are the main advantages of VPS AI itself for Web3?
Yeah, I think of this in terms of a couple of different categories, right? So you have the decentralized infrastructure. You have access to high performance computing. You have kind of and I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail, but some of the cost efficiencies that we're able to pass along, and then the interoperability. So from a decentralized infrastructure standpoint, advantages, or Web3 advantages, really the enhanced security. So by leveraging decentralized infrastructure and distributing control across multiple nodes, you reduce the single point of failure risk, making the overall system more resilient, improving uptime. And, we've heard some examples throughout this. But again, the bank's website goes down, you can't access your funds. That's not a risk that you have with decentralized infrastructure. And then, by eliminating those central points of control, we ensure that the data and applications are less susceptible to, manipulation, censorship, unauthorized tampering, etc. From a kind of high performance computing, we're providing the GPU-enabled VPSs. And so that computing power is really essential for Web3 applications. You see use cases such as AI, machine learning, complex simulations. Again, providing users access to that type of compute really does help advance some of the objectives and goals, and allows projects to build upon Web3 tech. And then also you get scalability, right? So it's designed to scale with the needs of Web3 projects. So if you need more compute, you have access to that. If you need to scale down from a cost standpoint, then you can do that as well through our DApp. Big thing is cost efficiency too, right? Is we offer by utilizing and kind of having that marketplace, we can really offer competitive pricing, and that allows us to reduce the cost of cloud computing resources for developers and businesses operating in the Web3 space. And then we're able to sort of optimize those resources. And so the other piece too, I think, is kind of the interoperability. So it's built to support interoperability between different blockchains and networks. That allows us to facilitate integration and interaction across various Web3 ecosystems. So one of the big promises, I think, of Web3 is that interop piece. There's been a lot of work and from a development front to ensure that interoperability, so cross-chain interoperability, bridges, different things like that. And our technology really looks to harness that as well.
Fantastic. So yeah, we've covered all the questions in the comments. I think we have time for just one more question. If anyone from the audience wants to ask PJ or Nick a question, or even myself, please go ahead. Otherwise, let's wrap this up. All right. It looks like we're all clear. Oh, wait 1 second. I think we got another comment. Let's just have a check. Okay. Someone just said hello.
Well, hello.
All right, guys. Yeah. Hey, guys. How are you doing? Okay, perfect. So I think that is everything that we have time for today. And I think we can say a huge thank you to our speakers again. As always, Nick and PJ, and of course, Nathan, wherever he is at this moment. So thank you all for your amazing and insightful answers. It's been a pleasure having you all here today, including our entire audience. Thank you guys all so much for being here to support VPS and to support the mission of decentralization. And yeah, if you guys have any more questions or want to learn more about Taiko, Ferrum, or VPS or NADMA, please contact us. You know, we're all on Twitter. We're always active, always degen. So I think from my side, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And yeah, have a fantastic day as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a ton for hosting. That was fantastic. Good conversation, guys.